Welcome to Afterthoughts, everybody. I am your host, Michael Dixon. It's been a while since we have recorded one of these, so very excited to get back in the studio recording, and I will definitely fuck up lots of times because it's been a bit since we've been back here, but yeah, we're excited to record today. With me, as always, John Garcia. What's up, John?
Hey, Dixon. I'm just taking it slow-zoo like Ozu. Oh. I assume that's on a shirt somewhere. I just don't know who would wear it.
I think you should put it on one.
Yeah. Our first Afterthoughts merch is a tribute to Ozu, and one that I don't know if he would approve of, but, you know.
He's dead. Who cares?
Whatever. Paul Schrader would wear that shirt.
And Ryan King. What's up, Ryan?
Trying not to click the wrong buttons over here. I have too many X buttons and canceling myself out, apparently, closing windows.
It's hard. The life of a podcaster is much more difficult than people realize.
There's just so many buttons.
Cool. So this week we are going to be talking about Late Spring by Yasujiro Ozu. This film came out in 1949. We're going to be kicking off a little mini-series on Japanese films. I have been kind of going through some Ozu films recently, and was talking to John and Ryan, and John and Ryan each have different types of Japanese cinema that they appreciate. So I think we're going to kind of go, for the art house side, and then maybe some anime and some other things. We're kind of trying to figure out what that dynamic might look like. But wanted to start out with Late Spring. So Yasujiro Ozu, if you haven't seen one of his films, he's a very distinctive filmmaker, and he really makes movies in kind of a Zen art style where he is, kind of very reserved, focusing on intimate family dynamics, and really trying to kind of reiterate on his craft and make his kind of movie better and better throughout his career, where Late Spring is kind of thought of as his first masterpiece, and then he would go on to reiterate on slight differences in plot, a lot of the same actors, and kind of trying to perfect his style as best he could in, kind of very Japanese way of going about things. But I think he's a fascinating filmmaker. He's really looking at contemporary Japan post-World War II and the effects that the war have had on society and family dynamics as families age and go through these different steps in their lives, and how Western influence and a post-war society are kind of dominating how their society is now functioning in this different world than they have been in previously. Late Spring follows the story of a widowed father, or a widower father, and his adult daughter, and their dynamics together. The father is played by Chishu Ryu, who is a very common actor in Ozu's films. His name is Shukichi. His daughter is Noriko, played by Setsuko Hara, who also appears in a lot of Ozu films. And the essential dynamic there is that, the daughter is of marrying age. She's about 27. She has experienced some sort of illness that is hinted at that may have been caused by working during the war. We're not really sure exactly what's going on there, but now she is feeling better, and she's just taking care of her father all day and kind of assuming wifely responsibilities, obviously not sexually, but, just taking care of the house, taking care of him. And the father starts to realize that maybe his daughter needs to kind of move on and marry someone else and move on to the next phase in her life. And she is very hesitant to do that. So it's just this kind of intimate family story, looking at these two characters and what's going on in their lives and the drama around that relationship on the background of post-war Japan that is going through a lot of change with Westernization. You see a lot of Coca-Cola signs and a lot of English around that, the entire world is changing around them, and thus their relationship is also changing within that. So I think this is an absolutely fascinating film. Ozu kind of, he's very reserved as you're watching the movie. There's, it can feel a bit slow at times where you're seeing these little calm family moments that feel almost insignificant. But then they really build throughout the film. And I think Ozu has this editing technique that is brilliant, where he shows you the scene and then he will flash to like a mountainside or a vase or a cityscape, and it kind of, and some music comes in and it lets you kind of sit in what you've just seen and cement those feelings over the course of the story, and kind of allow yourself to pause and build and add to what you've seen before. And then by the end of the movie, it just becomes so powerful, kind of out of nowhere. You're not really expecting this massive emotion to kind of come soaring through the end of the film. But I think Ozu is a fascinating filmmaker. I've really loved everything that I've seen of his, even though a lot of his movies are very similar. But yeah, I'm really interested to hear what you guys think. He's a very idiosyncratic filmmaker, and I'm sure you will both have interesting takes on kind of what he's trying to do. But Ryan, had you ever seen an Ozu film before? What were your thoughts on Late Spring?
Yeah, I have not seen an Ozu film before. This was the first one. I definitely heard of Tokyo Story. I think that's the one that's probably like best known, but haven't had a chance to watch that. It's something I've intended to go back and catch some of his films. It's really interesting watching something like this and having seen its influences so much to go back and be able to pinpoint like, oh, this is the movie that this comes from. A lot of the anime and other Japanese films I've seen really clearly take influence from this. I think it's kind of interesting to compare him to his contemporaries and kind of see this subtlety. And then that's what I got really interested in was, I think Japanese cinema, from a Western perspective, people often talk about it being this like really slow, subtle thing. But I think as you get more into it, I actually feel like most Japanese cinema and television is pretty bold and clear and loud. And Ozu and the filmmakers that kind of followed his style do have this subtlety that's interesting to look at, and just trying to sort of piece apart. And I don't even know if there is necessarily full meaning behind each of these shots exactly when he cuts away to just sort of something else and then cuts back. These decisions to not show stuff that would seem important or not tell us stuff that the characters know in these sort of reverse ironies that kind of are strange. The most notable one to me early on is the Noriko is hanging out with this other guy that she knows, and it's scenes that are played totally romantic in a movie that's being set up about a marriage. And then she really quickly offhandedly to someone else who's like, oh, are you going to get married to him? And she's like, he's already engaged. And you're like,
yeah,
what? Like as a viewer, yeah, it's such a strange, like, okay, that's not what I saw, or I didn't really understand why you showed me that, right? And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting how Ozu makes those decisions. And I definitely, I would like to dig in on those thoughts and the subtlety, but the acting here is really, I think, the other part that takes it over the top. Like, really interesting choices by Ozu, but the subtlety in the faces and the emotion and the way that Noriko's smile changes over the course of this film.
Yes.
That's the thing to watch for sure.
Cool. John, what'd you think about Late Spring?
Well, right prior to showing me Late Spring, you had sat down. We watched Autumn Afternoon, which was Ozu's final film in 1962. Yeah, and it's interesting to go backwards from what is his last film, and which, there's no way that he can improve upon the craft past that point, posthumously. But
don't put it past him.
Yeah, he could come back. But to have that film be very similar to this one, to see like the iteration, but like reversed, was interesting, and it was hard to not watch them in comparison and wonder, if you watch them side by side or back to back, how you would feel and how they focused on different aspects of the same kind of family dynamic. But yeah, I did notice in this one that there were much more, like there were like lip quivers. There was like musculature in the face that people just had. I was like, that's like crazy that they're kind of channeling certain emotion at a time and like holding back or like letting it show through. And I think of a lot of contemporary dramas, not in Japanese cinema, obviously, and like more Western cinema, is like people, over the top acting. Or I think of Adam Driver screaming in Scarlett Johansson's face in Marriage Story as being like the ultimate expression of like a breakdown or this break in the emotional barrier and that composition.
How dare you insult Nicolas Cage like that, John?
But here there is that kind of, it's subtle. It can be subtle. It can be smaller, but I feel like Ozu does such a good job of capturing the erosion of a polite society, like characters that are operating within these, I think at one point, Dixon, you said like a long con was sort of had in the dad trying to introduce this other woman to his daughter. And it was like having to set up these different social engagement sections where they could brush past each other or see each other. And to see like that happening plus kind of like strategy, just like it was like an art of war thing from a emotional standpoint where characters were slowly lowering their guard or having it chipped away at, or you could tell that their composition was starting to like really endure and suffer through different scenes. And I found that super fascinating because it didn't all happen at once. And it is like, to your point, Dixon, once you get to the end, you might not expect that emotional, like a bombastic sort of moment of everything breaking, but everything is laid the groundwork to that moment when the characters realize something's wrong and there's a disconnect between them and you kind of see the heightened emotions come out. It's all there leading up to it. And it's kind of wild to watch it and know that that's where Ozu is taking you the whole time. And it almost is aligned to his editing style of when he not even just lets things sink in, but the way that he navigates spaces. I see a lot of Wes Anderson influence in Ozu's style. Like, I feel like the way he aligns his shots and sets everything up kind of flatly, but that there is a depth to the flat. Like I know, Dixon, you told me that he uses a 50 millimeter lens for everything.
Every single shot.
Every single shot is that. And it makes more sense that like you restrict yourself on that axis and now you have to challenge yourself in another aspect of the dimension you give. But to see a character move through a house is like they go into one room and you hear their footsteps and then it cuts to the next room and your mind has already kind of filled in the gaps of where they are and you're building out the floor plan as you're going rather than having it told to you up front, having it front loaded at the beginning of them. Like I could see any kind of Ozu film being done by an American director in the way that like the first 10 to 15 minutes is a family. Every single room in the house has to be hit. Like you have to see where, the dad is doing his paperwork in one room and then you have to go immediately into the kitchen and you have to go here and it's always single shot or it's multiple shots cut up. But Ozu doesn't care. He just kind of reveals the world to you as the film goes. And between Late Spring and Autumn Afternoon, he plays with how he reveals the rest of Japan. It's really fascinating. So anyways, that's my long tangent. I really enjoyed Late Spring.
On that note, I'm like, he's almost allergic to dynamic camera. I think the only technically dynamic shots he has in this is he has a shot outside of a train.
Yeah.
Where you see the side of the train and you see the countryside kind of moving. And then he has the couple of scenes where they're riding the bicycles, but either the camera is steady and the bicycles are coming or going from the camera, or he has it like perfectly timed on the bicycle, like so that the background is kind of moving past. It's also from below them, so you're just sort of seeing their face and the handlebars, which I was trying to figure out how in 1949 he was doing that shot, because today you just be like, you just look at the camera up to the bike and then everything goes, you hold it steady, and so much stuff can happen in camera to handle the balance. But I'm like, I don't know, did he have a car and he was towing the bikes? Probably not even. Did he have someone just fucking walking backwards next to the bikes while they went slow? Probably.
Roller skates.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ozu was like, by the end of his career, he stopped moving the camera entirely. Like he became kind of more and more himself as he continued to make movies and decide what his style was going to be. And he just doesn't move the camera at all in the final few movies that he made. But I think it's a very interesting style choice to where like he crafts these very intricate scenes, and he spent a lot of time with the cinematographer like making sure the camera was in the exact right place and all the set decorations were in the exact right spot to achieve what he was wanting to achieve, and then every shot is shot from the angle as if you are sitting on the floor watching what's going on, so it's like you almost feel like you are a member of the family seeing what's going on in the house as these interactions are happening.
Yeah. Except when you get to the other, I feel like when you get to the other house where there's no sitting room with the woman who apparently has forsaken her Japanese cultural roots for Western
for chairs with legs.
Chairs with legs. Yeah, that's when I feel like the camera gets propped up alongside, and you have to sit at their height, kind of in its own way. I feel like there's a lot of that subconscious trickery going on. Like I felt things change without knowing really what was changing when I was watching it, where I was like, this is a character dialogue sequence. Ozu really likes to do a lot of the 1-2s but he does like full on where the character's like center frame. It's not like off to the side line of action kind of thing. Just feels like he is trying to capture the full performance of the actor talking to the other character. But then when like set pieces change, especially in this film, because in Autumn Afternoon, he doesn't really do a lot of the look at how much it's capturing a different period in Japan at that point, and there's sort of a different kind of somber and sad aspect to it. But here you see like those signs with Coke in them. You see that that coffee shop that has like English words. And then you see this like big, like colonial style house, or I don't even know really what, it just seems like much more of a Western style, all the molding and doors, and it's a complete change because you spend the first portion of the movie in Japanese style homes, and you see like the sliding doors and the way that everybody's sitting. And then you go from that to like, now we've got chairs that have legs and here's this table. And it just feels so different that even it was like my brain split between the dialogue between the characters and this kind of like subconscious presence of some other culture in Japan while they were talking about what was right for Noriko. And it was really interesting to feel that pressure.
Yeah. The biggest contrast is definitely her aunts. We see her first, and this is kind of the opening scene at this tea ceremony. Everyone is dressed traditionally. You know, we see some shots of the outside, everything traditional house, all of that. They're all acting very, polite and traditional. And then her friend's house, when she goes over, who's wearing Western clothing, takes off a Western apron, is making a Western, like, shortcake, has seats, with tables with legs. And yeah, it's just like they're such polar opposites. It is interesting how this movie plays with both of those, the old and the new in Japan, but then in the same way, marriage, old and new, because it's sort of at this changeover time as well. And the fact that both her aunt in this very old traditional mindset and her friend who's gotten divorced and just talks shit about men, both telling her like, you need to get married though. Like, right. I think it's interesting how they give both of those sides, but then still are kind of pushing to this same expectation.
Yeah, and there's such an interesting clash of cultures and ideas in this movie in lots of ways, where like you see the Western influence as both a tragic force that is like changing the culture around them, and as a positive force in certain ways, right? Where like Noriko's friend who's divorced was able to get a job as a stenographer and like pay for herself and be able to have her own apartment, furnish it herself. Yeah, it's in Western styling, and it feels kind of sad that that's the direction that the society is headed. But there are these positive aspects that come into the society where, hey, like maybe, Noriko, if she wants to, maybe she can just be an independent woman and go get a job. And she explores that as a possibility in the film, right? Like, does she want to stay with her dad? Does she want to get married? Or does she want to go get a job and forge a different kind of life for herself? And I think Noriko is such an interesting character because she is like the most old-fashioned of everyone in the movie. Like she thinks it's disgusting when her dad's friend gets remarried and tells him to his face that she thinks he's filthy. Like
it's like wild.
And it just like there's just all these different ideas kind of coming together at this turning point in a country going through so much turmoil. I think it's just a fascinating way to show all of that in such a kind of a calm, restrained way. You're seeing all this turmoil play out in a very polite society, while everyone is kind of trying to keep those same polite airs of the the prior culture that they've had.
Yeah, that was where I thought about a lot of like the subtext of the movie and sort of what, because it's one of those things where I did beyond the small conversation that we had like prior to the film and Autumn Afternoon. There's not a whole lot that I know about what Ozu is trying to chase in his features, like what he is truly iterating towards or trying to say. But from what I can gather, with post-war Japan commentary on it, this also aligned really well with Noriko being sort of a representation of the youth of Japan and what ideology you should cling to, what culture you should cling to. People being like, you just need to marry a man, and having different ideas of who that man should be or what it should be, sort of speaking to the ideology of, well, you can't cling on to your dad this whole time. Like the rising sun is over. Like that era of Imperial Japan is done. You can't, but you have to get married to something else. Maybe there's like a new burgeoning Japanese ideology in this Western influenced Japan that you can try to cling to. That's much more like, salvage what you can from your cultural roots, or maybe you should completely fully embrace like the newer culture that's occupying us right now. And Noriko just kind of being at the heart of it, not really wanting to make a move. Not really wanting to commit to any of that and trying to find her own way to be who she wants to be and to understand Japan how she wants to understand it. And in between that, we get, like a kabuki performance as well that sort of underscores like, well, we still have our, cultural theater. We still attend, these arts performances. There are still these aspects, even if you can see Coke cans and advertisements and English cafes sort of starting to encroach upon the territory. There is a nugget of our cultural heritage and history here. So the more that like the movie progressed, I was really kind of spellbound by that subtextual play. And I felt like there was something there, and I want to see more of Ozu's films to see if he expands further on it with them. But I don't know.
One interesting thing about the play.
Yeah.
So I do think that was kind of an interesting thing to be in there. So it's a no play, not a kabuki, because there is a subtle difference. And
please, Ryan, educate me.
I actually thought this was interesting because I was kind of comparing Ozu and Kurosawa, and almost feel like Ozu is the no play and Kurosawa is very kabuki. Kabuki is what you more traditionally think of. It is kind of like the loud and obvious and does tend to be historical plays. So it is often like samurai tales. And while Kurosawa kind of is known for that in the West, that's honestly not even like half his work is not samurai films, but that is kind of what he's known for. But his other films, his gangster films, his noir films, they're also very like brash and on the face. Like it's kind of obvious what they are. Noah is the one that's traditionally with the masks and is much more subtle, a bit like, for a Western audience, they're a little bit harder to crack. They're a bit like, poems from Japan where you're kind of like, why did they just say, the title of this movie, Late Spring, right? I think it's kind of clear in this film what it means, but a lot of times in, a Japanese poem, it's like crickets, late spring, Mount Fuji. And you're like, the fuck does that mean? Why is that an amazing thing? But to a Japanese audience, they would understand what those things are in reference to. The particular play that they watch is like a very sexually charged play, which is interesting because that's where we see her dad look at this, the other lady that he's supposedly going to marry, and then she gets this like utter jealousy and upset during the play. Meanwhile, in the background, we're hearing about all these irises, which they use much the way American painting uses irises to mean all the different sexual organs, right? And they're like talking about them in this play. And so, yeah, it was interesting that I'm like, Ozu, I think he is more subtle, and he picked a more classical but also subtle play to put into his thing as one of these like turning point of his time. But Japanese plays, both kabuki and no, use masks and like really like repeat certain elements to get this point across to where anyone can kind of sit down, like what we say with wrestling, John, of like, who he is. By the time he gets to by the time he gets in the ring, you need to know who this guy is and do I like him or not, right? And so they use those like trappings over and over again, which I think the like loud, brash, obvious, anime and Japanese film, if you watch Japanese TV, right? Like their game shows, they're very like loud, obvious,
Yep.
right? They're like
Human Tetris.
replicate. Yeah. Not only do
Love
they
Human
like
Tetris.
say the things over and over, they write it in text and they have an emoji on top of it. And it's like they're really trying to tell you something and they tell it to you over and over and over again. That this is like the complete opposite. He's not even necessarily trying to tell you something. He might just be showing it and it's up to you to figure out, how you feel about it. And I'm like really was fascinated at the end of this as the dad is talking about like, I didn't really intend to get married. I pretty much just did all this so that she would get married. And I was like, man, would a contemporary Japanese audience watching this, what would their feelings have been? Because I think they would also have had to have been like really conflicted, because I'm certain that there were people that sat there and were like, well, the dad did the right thing. Like he had to sacrifice himself for his daughter's future. And eventually the marriage will work out. Maybe 10, what does he say? He's like, it could take you 10 years and then you'll actually be happy in your marriage. Right. And at the time, most Japanese people were in arranged marriages and probably kind of like nodded their head and were like, yes, that's what it's like. But to a younger Japanese audience, they may have been sitting there being like, dang, I want to pick my own thing. Why can't I just be happy? Right. Like now. So I think it's a very interesting. I don't know that Ozu tries to tell us anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's really just trying to capture these emotional dynamics between these family members who are almost unable to talk to each other, like they are, occasionally we'll say something straightforward like, hey, I think you should marry. But like a lot of the dynamics between the family members goes unsaid. And it's, the dad trying to do what he thinks is best for the daughter, but not really understanding if that's what she wants. And the daughter trying to do what she thinks the dad needs, but not really like asking to see if that's actually what he needs or wants. And like those family dynamics that we're all so familiar with where like, man, this could be so much easier if I didn't have to like tread around feelings or, like a pre-existing dynamic and we could just have a blunt conversation. It's like those things don't really happen in family dynamics, and those are playing out over the course of the film. And I think every movie that I've seen of his that's post-war has been like in light of whatever stage of post-war Japan we are in at this point. It's 49, late afternoon is 1962. You're in a different phase after the war and you're reckoning with different things at that time. And those cultural moments play into those family dynamics as they go along. And it seems to me that Ozu was just fascinated with the plight of middle-class Japan and trying to kind of explore that in his work.
Yeah, I think too, it's always fascinating to see a different Japanese director's take on kind of the binds of the polite interfamily relationship. Like we've talked about Tokyo Sonata on this podcast before, and that's a much later stage Japanese cinema in a similar kind of perilous period of like layoffs and job complications and a salary man trying to keep up appearances with his family that he needs to be the breadwinner. There's like a cultural complex he's bound to, even though the mom kind of held the family together. But that one, I look at that film compared to this and you see these dramatic leaps and bounds in the way that the family expresses themselves. And also because there's much more brazen, I guess, comedy bits on it. Like here, the comedy is very subtle. There's a lot of like funny, circumstantial pieces. The characters banter back and forth and they have like jabs at each other, but it always kind of comes in this mesh of their politeness. Like the aunt wanting to ask if she's decided or not if she's going to marry that guy. And the dad's like, you can't do it yet. You need to do it tactfully. And she's like, I will do it tactfully. And she like runs in there and it's like, did you decide yet? Like, have you made up your mind yet? And these kind of like bits of like, it's pressure. It's not over the top necessarily. It's very much like, okay, she's still sort of, she's on the boundary line of breaking that like social rule of like, you can't just start pressuring or say these things. Whereas like Tokyo Sonatas was very much like characters straight up confronting each other. And I remember like in that movie, there was a son who wanted to go off to be part of the military. And there's a whole confrontation of like, I forbid it. Like, how could you do this behind our back? And like these other things that feel they were less sought out. Like I feel in this movie, a lot of people are asking questions that are trying to lead somebody into admitting that they're trying to do something, or that they have done something. And it's kind of fascinating to see Ozu capture how you can bind yourself up in those. It's almost like a game of chess to a degree, like social chess. You're trying to like, how do I get my dad to admit that he needs me? Or how do I get my daughter to recognize that she needs to marry? And trying to like that whole 4D chess move of getting a woman to look like she's going to marry me and then being like, I'm not going to marry. No, we're not going to, we're on the other side of this, like, this shrine, and we're walking together almost like we are in love and we'll be married. But no, we won't. It's wild. And also the sequences that let you reflect on that, tying back to like Ozu cutting away to something and letting you think. We get to sit with our characters a lot more in this movie and think about it. Like when they're in the Zen garden, they have like the sort of like sand garden that they're all staring at, where you have these like massive lines where like the rakes are drawn through, and those gardens are they have a lot of upkeep to them. But it's when the dad is like wandering aloud with his friend. He's like, maybe having daughters is like the wrong thing. Like having a daughter kind of sucks because you have to give them up. Whereas if I had a son, then I would just welcome a daughter into the family. The guy's like, well, we married somebody else's daughter too. And he's like, oh yeah, you're right. I guess that's true. Like we need this. But just those moments where they kind of think aloud and they're allowed a moment to reflect on it. And then they come to a recognition that like they do need to do something, as opposed to a monologue to each other. I think the only time we get the monologue is when the dad is really telling her like, in 10 years, however many years, marriage is hard. You need to work on it, which is already after the decision's kind of been made. And it's much more of a consolation, like in a wisdom sharing, like generational wisdom sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think you may remember, John, there's a scene in Autumn Afternoon where Shishiryu's character is sitting at the bar talking to his old buddy, and he's like, maybe it's good that we lost the war. Yeah. And like, it feels to me like there's this grappling in all of his movies with this culture change. Is this a good thing that we're going through this culture change, or is it a bad thing? And then he has a family dynamic where there's change occurring, and he is asking that same question about that family dynamic. Like, is this good or is this bad that this change is happening? And the answer seems to be, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's just going to happen. Like it is an inevitable change and part of life. And we can't sit and worry about, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? It's just how life has to go. And you kind of just have to be accepting of life as it comes. And no, not everybody has to get married, not everybody has to live the exact same life, but generally a lot of generations go through similar things, similar life phases: leaving home, getting married, getting old, losing your spouse, losing your children, dying. There's it's kind of like, is this good, is this bad? It just is. And that's the life we have, and we have to be able to find the joy in that and like make the happiness for ourselves through those changes and as we reach those next phases of life.
Yeah, that conversation she has with her dad on that monologue, like he not only says like, oh, you're gonna have to get happy in this or whatever, he does straight up say like, I'm gonna die like it's gonna, this is gonna end one way or another, right? Yeah, he totally says that.
Yeah,
I love that scene so much. I think it's just kind of all of the unspoken things coming to the foreground where they're father and daughter are going on one last vacation together before she's married off. And he's like, you can't, like, he's like, you can't, she says to him, like, I want to stay with you. I don't want to get married. I am happy being with you. If you want to get married, that's fine. But like, I love you and I want to be with you. And that's when I'm happy, is when I'm here with you.
I want things to be the way they are. I like the way they are. Yeah.
And he's like, no, like change is inevitable. It has to come. Like, you will be able to forge a relationship with your new husband and provide him the same love that you've given me. And, it's not, marriage isn't happiness. I'm not saying you should do this because marriage is going to make you happy. Like, you have to build a life for yourself and create that happiness and work with your partner to forge something new and fresh and, make a life for yourself. You can't live my life for me. You have to go out and live your own. And I think that it was just such a beautiful conversation, and it clearly helps Noriko to reframe things a little bit and think about things a little bit differently. She still, it seems like she's going into that very pressured, and I don't know that she's necessarily doing what she wants to do, but she's at least kind of understanding things a little bit more broadly and, appreciating what her father is going through as he's thinking through all of this.
Yeah, and to bring it back to Autumn Afternoon, which I think earlier you called it Late Afternoon, which was really funny.
Oh, sorry. Late Spring and Autumn Afternoon is his final film, which I also highly recommend.
They're two sides of the same coin, and it's really fascinating. If you do watch Late Spring, you should definitely watch Autumn Afternoon. Doesn't matter if it's really double featured or not, but just keeping them in mind, because Late Spring, to its name, is much more about a woman who is on that cusp of maturity, of becoming like her own person, of moving out of her house and with her father and like marrying into something else. And Autumn Afternoon is focused on, like the twilight of an older man in Japan who, had survived the war and this cultural change and everything, and is now dealing with needing to push his daughter out of the nest, but also there's less of a fixation on like any of the daughter's side of the story in that film, and much more of the dad trying to guarantee that everything is kind of set up for him to sort of pass on into his own sort of late stage of life and be at peace that like his family's taken care of. And there's more sibling characters in that movie. There's more to focus on that the dad has to take care of. Whereas in this film, it's much more focused on like just the father-daughter relationship and the daughter's experience and aversion to trying to move past what she needs to. So I feel like they complement each other really well.
Definitely.
And it's just fascinating to see Ozu meditate on these two different perspectives through telling the same story. It's almost like a Rashomon of sorts.
Kind of.
But like the different way of telling the story is just the minute details focused on like the certain life within Japan that is followed, whether it's this younger woman or this older man. It completely changes kind of the context of how you experience it. And you see in Autumn Afternoon other characters that are in similar sort of parallel positions, like daughters who regret that they have to take care of their father and that they are tormented by it. And it's really heartbreaking, but it's just eye-opening to see both of these films together expose a lot of that family dynamic. So
yeah, mentioning Rashomon, that's 1 year after this film, and I feel like Kurosawa's only other somewhat subtle film is Ikuru, which is another 2 years after that, and then I think that's it. So I feel like there's a very direct flow from him having seen this and been in contact with Ozu, and then being like, I want to make a little bit of a subtle period piece, and then going almost right back into like, all right, back into the crazy samurai stuff.
Yeah. We got it out of our system. It's fine.
So Ozu also made a film in 1951, 2 years after Late Spring, called Early Summer, that is almost the exact same plot as Late Spring, except the daughter brings the idea to her parents that she wants to get married and move out. And so it's more from her perspective, her desires and impetus that are driving the story, rather than the father trying to kind of parent her into like moving on to the next phase of her life. So he explores this dynamic a hell of a lot in his films, and he's very good at it.
A winter
really
title? Was there not a winter? He didn't make his way through.
I don't know of any of his films that have winter
spring
in the
you're
name.
Born, and you
Yeah,
die
I guess
winter.
that's
So he
true.
goes from spring to autumn.
Spring, summer, autumn, and then winter. It's too late.
I'm not sure if he does or not. Not that I know of off the top of my head, but
Yeah. It makes sense that it would be seasonally tied too. Like to me, that just spring being kind of this earlier maturity and summer being sort of the middle point. So yeah, compliments that he would just focus on those into autumn and be done with it.
yeah. I want to talk about a couple of the like emotional moments in the film that kind of got me. And Ryan, you had mentioned one of them earlier, talking about Noriko's smile throughout the film. And she starts out just a very happy person. She's always got a big grin on her face. She's just really happy to like help out her father and to, anybody that she encounters in her life. She's very friendly with. Even when she's telling her dad's friend he's a filthy bastard, she's like very happy about it. And she's just seems to really enjoy life and the phase of life that she is in. And then as she keeps getting this pressure to marry from her father, from her aunt, from her friend, like the smile starts to slowly get smaller over the course of the film. And then when finally her aunt pressures her into accepting the marriage proposal, she comes downstairs and talks to her dad, and he's like, so, your aunt just left. She was ecstatic. I guess you're accepting the marriage proposal. And she kind of looks at him over her shoulder with like almost hatred in her eyes and like tears welling up. And she says, yeah, I accept it. Like, I'm ready to do this. Everybody seems to want me to do this, so I guess I'm just going to fucking do it. Like, it's not what she says, but that's what you see in her face. And it's just so heartbreaking to see her kind of accept the change that everyone in her life is forcing upon her, that she isn't ready to accept herself. And I thought it was just a heartbreaking moment in the film to see kind of her spirit broken in that moment.
Yeah. Especially when her aunt, like right before that, when her aunt confronts her upstairs in her room, the social room that she's in, her aunt's like asking her, like, and her aunt's getting happier and happier as she asks her. She's like, "You're going to marry this guy? So you're really going to do it?" And she's like getting further and further away from her aunt and just being like, yes, I'm going to do it. Yes. And there's like that hesitation and that withdrawal of just being like, yeah, I'm just fuck it. Like, everybody stop fucking bugging me about this. I'll do it. And it's kind of like the aunt doesn't even register that. It's so important to her that she gets married to this guy in particular that it's like, and even her dad.
There's nothing wrong with him. What could you find fault with in this potential suitor?
Yeah.
You've never met him. He's got the mouth of Gary Cooper.
Yeah. That's right.
He's Gary Cooper from here down. Yeah.
Not from the nose up. He looks nothing like Gary Cooper, but
So you have the transatlantic Japanese accent.
Setsuko Ohara's smile at the beginning is a very like infectious, smile. Like it's amazing. And her fake smile, like it's such a clear like fake smile, or her like anger during the play. Like that's a generational facial expressions. Really amazing how she's able to get those things through.
Absolutely. Like, and she's so charming just on her own. Like, I don't know. She brings such a good chemistry between her and the dad too. The beginning, the opening banter when he's like, "Go make tea for me." And she comes back and is like ribbing him about, what the fuck was she ribbing him about? There's something that she's like teasing him on. And he's like,
"Oh, let's get the mahjong table out and play." And she's like, "Did you finish your manuscript?" And he's like, "No." And she's like, "So we're not getting it out to play."
Yeah. And he's like, "Where's my tea?" Gets mad.
Just get my tea. Yeah.
He's like a little boy. It's funny that there's that. Yeah, the dad has to go through it too, where he's kind of reverted to that little boy nature. It's like, "Is your homework done?" It's like, "No." Oh man, we haven't even mentioned the score either in this, which Ozu does like a really. He kind of always has like a whimsical score from the only two movies I've seen, from this and Autumn Afternoon. He really kind of like he powers through any dramatic sequence by having like this sort of upbeat, peppy, like, I don't even know how to describe it really, but just the way that it plays out, it makes me question, and maybe that's the intention, sort of like the emotions of the character, because what's being said on screen can be heart-wrenching or very much like it's a strange pressure to put onto another character, but in the background, it's kind of doing like a jaunty little like bum, 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 bum. It's just like some weird upbeat rhythm to it, and it's fascinating to hear him use that, especially in Autumn Afternoon. He uses it when somebody's like crying. It's like playing in the background of a scene, and you're like, wait, this is not a happy time. It's not trying to tell you how to feel. It's much more the opposite. Like, the clash makes you feel something and think harder on like what's actually happening in the scene in contrast.
I think it's a very pensive score, and I think it works very well when they have those interludes between scenes where you're looking at a mountainside or a cityscape or a vase or whatever, and you're hearing this music, and it just kind of makes you ponder what you've just seen and cements those feelings in you as you move on to the next part of the movie. And I think it works really well. And then it swells up into this like incredibly emotional moment at the end. And it's really not, the music's not really changing, but it's like the visuals are, and you're kind of hearing those themes repeated with those feelings you've seen before. And yeah, I'm not really sure like what magic he is doing with that, but it works really well.
Yeah, especially as somebody who just watched the new Jurassic World movie and they played the John Williams score over two characters talking with like really forced expositional dialogue. I was like, man, this absolutely sucks because the composer's trying to tell me how to feel. And it's not even the composer anymore. It's just somebody pushing play on John Williams, like music, trying to be like, at this moment, you should feel this. But in like Ozu's film, the music doesn't really... It isn't primarily dictating how you should feel. It's allowing you to explore the feelings in the scene and build up to them. So I don't know. It just, yeah, really, really fascinating.
Yeah. It's interesting not having the like dramatic stings that you would expect or really the full tension that you would expect in it. Again, I kind of like jump back to the play that we see that has the traditional like taiko drum and the guy, doing that Japanese like whoa in the background or whatever to like really sell you, right? That I think most Japanese audiences would expect a more not subtle music in the background to kind of tell them where the tension is supposed to be. And even the like upbeat in the beginning, the sort of, I would definitely say like when she's riding the bike and she's out or she going, she goes to the museum, we don't see it again, but like there's kind of like a happier-ish tune, but it's never really that high either. The whole thing, like it's up a little in certain spots, but it never really tells you how exactly you should feel about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want to talk about the ending, but is there anything else we should touch on before we get to that point?
That aunt totally stole that wallet, right?
Oh yeah. What the fuck?
Definitely.
It was like crazy. She was like, oh, it's good luck. And then she just walked away with it.
I was really interested in that because, again, I don't really know that we fully ever get anyone's motivations or emotions. I think we kind of see everything and we know, like, right, we know Noriko's upset, but we don't know exactly why she wants to stay with her dad, right? Or how we don't see her talking with her fiance or the marriage or whatever, right? Like we don't really get like she tells her friend like, yeah, he did kind of look like Gary Cooper. Yeah, he was nice. But we don't know how she really feels about it either, right?
He looks like their electrician, I think it was, but your electrician
he looks like
also looks like Gary
Cooper. Also sort of looks like Gary Cooper, I guess. Yeah. Her aunt's motivations beyond the just like, oh, traditional, you're supposed to get married. She's kind of deceitful and shitty about the stuff too.
Yeah.
But I had been reading how it's like really hard to lose your wallet in Japan, even modern day, like Tokyo, that they just, it will eventually show up. Like it will get to the police and it will show up because it's a society that's like very invested in taking care of each other and having a responsibility. And
that's mind blowing.
Yeah, it really is. But I'm thinking of that being like modern day Japan. I'm like, man, 1949, I think you probably could not lose your wallet. Yeah. Like that was a society that had even more of an honor system than they have now. And this lady just straight up picks it up. And the dad is like, hey, you should return that. She's like, yeah, I'm going to. He turns around and sees a cop.
Yeah. And they don't
and then they walk off and she doesn't do anything about it. And then the cop's like walking around there still kind of in the foreground. And I'm like 100%. Like he knows she's not going to give it back. And he asks her later. And she's like, yeah, I'll give it back.
And it's been like 10 days at that point and she still has it. And
she needs to hold on to it. It's a weird hostage. See, that's the unseen. That's the deleted scene when she's like, you better fucking marry this Gary Cooper from the mouth down or I'm never going to return this wallet. The only other thing before we get into the ending sequence is that, Dixon, when you were talking about how Noriko is so comfortable telling that guy that he's a filthy bastard for remarrying, it made me really want at least one scene that's like a ported over scene to a Western audience where Joe Pesci plays that guy. And it's like, how am I filthy? What the fuck is that about? Like, I was just remarried to this person. Like, I feel like Joe Pesci somehow would be a great uncle figure / dad's friend.
That would be an interesting recasting.
He's old enough to be that professor style uncle age, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, it's my only other note.
All right. Yeah. So I want to talk about the end of the movie. So kind of we've been building toward this moment. We talked about the speech between the father and daughter when they're on vacation. I think that whole sequence is really great in Kyoto. There's a lot of kind of, pensive or philosophical conversations, and then musical interludes with shots of temples and things like that really help to kind of build toward the end of the film. And then, when she does end up going off to marry, again, they don't show the marriage. They show, her getting ready and her dad kind of wishing her well, and them kind of cementing the end of their relationship and as it was, right? And she goes off to get married, and he goes out to a bar with her friend who is working as the stenographer, and kind of trying to deal with the idea that his daughter's not going to be there anymore. And then he goes home to an empty house and has to feed himself for the first time in forever, and he just starts peeling an apple and sitting there kind of like head begins to drop, and you have this cut to the tide coming in and out, and this kind of crescendo of music as you are watching the ocean, and then the credits roll. And I just think it's like an incredible way to end the movie, kind of on this shot of the inevitability of change, right? Like the tide is always going to come in and it's always going to go back out, and it's going to do the same thing every time. And each generation has to go through the same phases of life and deal with the same problems in different ways, different cultural contexts, but that change is always there. And the ocean, the coming in and going out of the tide is as permanent as the mountains that we see in other shots in the movie. And I thought it was just a really beautiful way to wrap up the film, and it just ends on this incredibly emotional note where, like, along through the movie there's kind of a quiet melancholy going through it, and then it ends in this kind of burst of bittersweet sadness at the end of the film that I thought was really powerful.
Yeah, just hearing looking at those ocean waves. Also, they talk about it a little bit before when she's like arguing with her dad about what he can and can't eat. Like when if she was to ever leave him, she's like, "You don't know how to make rice.
Yeah.
You would burn all of your rice." And so you kind of have this expectation that, I wouldn't say that everybody in the audience has the expectation, but that like the dad would show some self-sufficiency in the way that he feeds himself and whatever. And I think that there's such a visual impact to him peeling that apple. It's giving him so much time to reflect on what he's doing, as opposed to if, there had tried to be some kind of like bookended, let's show him make rice kind of thing that would have probably not visually connected quite as well when he sets the pot to boil and then moves over somewhere else. There is kind of this, like, you're feeling every cut into that apple was kind of this like visceral strain of thought as he's trying to peel it in a circle and like working his way towards kind of the core of his understanding of what's going to happen next. And then to get the ocean view. I love that. That's like one of my favorite metaphors in any kind of movie is just waves in general. I love the ocean, to see it moving and to hear it and to kind of like have that reflection. I don't care how many times it's used. When it's used well in the context of the story, it always gets me. And that ending sequence really just like sat with me as the waves kind of lapped over each other. And I was like, man, fucking, it's just going to go on. Like this, you can't stop it.
Roma feels.
Yeah.
Waves in the water. Yeah. That was the thought that I had. Definitely this like permanence of things coming and going, right? That it kind of represents that things are gonna change, right? The water changes the rock to sand or what have you. I also like that he has this conversation where we're in the bar, and he's asks the friend like, "Oh, you're gonna come visit me, right?" And she's like, "Yeah." And it almost was in that, you know how you always say to someone like, "Oh yeah, we should hang out."
But you don't,
right? And then
really
no one makes a
intend to.
concrete plan about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know how many times I bail on Dixon? God, he's a sucker. He just always buys it.
But yeah, like that bittersweet scene there, and that's where he admits, like, yeah, this was a sham, to get her to marry, and then he just goes back to his house by himself and peels the apple by himself, and then sits there, and yeah, you just really feel this like down. It's interesting because that's a change from the book that this is based on.
Mm-hmm.
In the book, it kind of presents it that yeah, he probably like led her on in order to get her married, but he does go through and end up getting married. But here, the choice by Ozu was like, no, we're gonna make the one thing he doesn't make subtle. He makes it blatantly obvious that the dad is sad and left alone at the end of this.
Yeah, that was a weird conversation between him and the friend where she's like, "You're just not gonna do it. Like, just don't do it." And he's like, "I was never gonna. Yeah, you're right. I'm not gonna do it." I was like, "Oh, okay.
Not gonna remarry."
Yeah, I'm not gonna remarry. I'm not gonna remarry. Why would I remarry? You know, like it was all for her. I think that it's the emphatic point that it was all for the daughter at the end of it, and that he's like, I mean, I guess that makes it a much more dramatic length to go to than to be like, yeah, no, I actually did like this person, and I will go through with the marriage, or like even if he didn't, to be like, well, I got to keep up appearances. To completely break that off is this crazy self-sacrifice of him being like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to go home and cut an apple open and try to eat it.
Yeah, in a way, I feel like, there's this equating this end to their relationship with his, potential for the relationship to end in his death. And she would have to move on either way.
Yeah.
That kind of like this, he knows it's going to happen one way or another, right? And like she goes off and has this, she's sad, she's grieving and going into this marriage. And I do feel like if you had him go into a marriage he wasn't into, it's not quite the same weight as him just being like, yeah, I'm just going to go and be alone, like in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah, because you would also be like, well, he's going to be taken care of.
Yeah, maybe he could make something of it and someone will take care of him, yeah.
Yeah. Autumn Afternoon has a similar ending, although there's a piece of shit son in it. It's like, I'll make you breakfast, Dad. You're like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it keeps the focus on the father-daughter relationship and the mourning of that changing, right? And like maybe he decides later to remarry, who knows? But like that's not what the movie's about, And I think it's better to kind of leave the focus there and not like leave the movie with the door open to the next thing. It's just closing the door on that phase of the father and daughter's relationship.
Yeah, it's like the end of The Godfather, which I just watched recently.
Not exactly.
They closed the door, Dixon. They closed the door. It's just sadder.
I do want to note that the screenwriter of this movie, Kogo Noda, he worked with Ozu on a lot of his films, and they were like really close friends and would Ozu has talked about why they work so well together. He's like, the reason that we are a great writing team is because we're the same physiologically. He's like, we both sleep late in the morning and we stay up late at night and we like to drink. And we'll just like go out to a bar and drink whiskey and sake and just start writing and just see what happens. And
so that's why Dixon likes Ozu.
I was like, this makes a lot of sense. But it's funny because like he's, the way he talks about his relationship with his writing partner is like bros going out and hanging out and getting drinks, and they're writing these incredibly subtle family drama screenplays, just like don't really, jive with what you would expect from that kind of relationship. But apparently they agreed on almost everything, and they were very similar in how they lived their lives, and so it just worked out perfectly between the two of them. So, and I think their level of being in sync is very evident in the films that come out at the end.
Yeah.
I will say it is interesting that Ozu never married.
And he lived with his mom for his whole life.
Yep. Yeah, for his whole life. Then he has so many films examining marriage and this like changing relationship and dynamic of marriage.
Well, and adult children relating to their
staying
parents.
with the parents. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I mean, the artist, it's inevitable. The artist's vision will be probably tied to their life very closely. So, although, I mean, that's why Scorsese covers a lot of crime films, because he knew a lot about
He's
crime.
constantly breaking people's knees.
That's right, yeah. He makes them walk home. And I'm pretty sure Schrader keeps a diary, and I'm very worried about him.
Yeah, that's 100% true.
Dixon, before we close out, I don't know what else was really on the docket, but one of the reasons why we got into watching Ozu films was because you gifted me a Paul Schrader book on, was it Transcendental Film?
Transcendental Style in Film.
And that contains Ozu and Bresson.
And Dreyer.
Yeah. Are there any nuggets of wisdom from that you wanted to share as part of this episode, or?
I think there's really, like, Schrader gets really deep into like Japanese culture and Zen ideology and how those are reflected in Ozu's films. And I think that's really fascinating to read through how that stuff comes through in his films. But Schrader analyzes his work through, is it the influence from Zen and Japanese culture that is crafting what he's doing, or is he doing something else that makes his films feel transcendent, that has this emotional weight to them that is kind of beyond what you would expect from cinema? And the way that Schrader frames that book is like, those three directors each have these incredibly emotional films and very idiosyncratic, distinct styles. And he talks about how film is not an art form that typically can achieve transcendence. Like, that is something that you need more kind of time with, where like a book could get you there, or a painting, but like a movie is all about action, and it's like jumping from scene to scene, and it's less of an exercise in kind of like discovering yourself and achieving something beyond who you are as a person, and transcending whatever plane of existence we are on here, and having some sort of spiritual experience with film. And he was like, but these three directors, Ozu, Bresson, and Dreyer, are able to achieve that through their film, and how are they able to do that? And he boils it down to the style and the techniques they use, rather than like the subject matter. It's actually the techniques involved. And so for Ozu, it's about, he's like, really where the transcendence occurs is in those shots of nature or cityscapes, and the music plays, and everything that you've seen before you kind of hits all at once and gives you this kind of overwhelming feeling at the end that you were like, kind of came out of nowhere, and you're not really sure how that happened. And, he'll show you stuff like that earlier in the movie, and you don't feel that way, but then it builds upon itself to the end of the film. And then like the shot of the permanence of the tide is the final thing that like elevates the film into some other plane of spiritual enlightenment. So I don't know. I think the book is really good, and it's fascinating to read through, especially if you're familiar with those directors. And if you aren't, it's a great opportunity to watch the films of those directors and explore those ideas through what Schrader is talking about. And as someone who is from a very religious background, as Schrader has tried to achieve some of those religious transcendent feelings through cinema, for me personally, it was a really interesting experience reading through that and kind of understanding what he was trying to talk through there. I think Schrader tries to achieve that in his own films in a different way. He's not, he's taking inspiration from these directors, but he's creating something different.
And you can see it in again, Schrader and Ozu both have iterative work. Like, I think that he's very much found what could be reduced and boiled down to like a simple kind of series of just men writing in journals is sort of the genre of what he has. But the context and the way that he approaches it does have a resonance every time that you watch it to a different facet of who you are, and also how you understand like the people around you. So whether it's Taxi Driver or it's First Reformed, I haven't seen The Card Counter. Like
Card Counter's good.
These kind of movies, I'm pretty sure, hold some sort of nugget of reflection in that what it means to be isolated and on your own, and how you can kind of drive yourself into a certain ideological hole. And it seems like Schrader really wants to crack through that and show you how to break free from it.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, that is Late Spring, 1949. I think you kind of already know, listener, but Ryan, would you recommend this movie?
Yeah, I would recommend this. I think for modern audience, somebody going into this like absolutely blind, it is a slow movie with a small focus. But if you give it like time and kind of sit there and contemplate and use the moments that Ozu gives you to sort of take the pause, the characters maybe are pausing to think as well. You can enjoy it. It's super interesting from a like filmmaking historical standpoint, because I can just see the effects that this had. Jumping to mind immediately was the shots of like just the mountain or a train or vase or what have you. To me, like John Evangelion, Hideaki Anno, and many of the Gainax people clearly love Ozu, because they're just like, here's shots of power poles and power lines, fucking no reason between things.
Yeah.
Or when there's an important dialogue between characters, we get like just their face and then a shot to something else fucking random and then back to someone else's face, like very much aping the same style. I've been playing Death Stranding 2, and Kojima has said before that Ozu has a lot of influences on him, and listed Late Spring as his favorite Ozu film, and I think at times even said it's his favorite film, period. Kojima is definitely on the in your face. I don't know the subtleties. His tool.
Thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't always know what the hell he's talking about either, but he's trying to talk about it very loudly. But you can still see that there are those influences. And so, yeah, I think it's really interesting to go back and see that. And then I always want to recommend to someone some Japanese cinema that is not samurai and not anime of people punching each other. And this is definitely a good one to check out.
Yeah, I'm very curious. Speaking of Hideo Kojima, I can't wait for Dixon to watch Death Stranding, the A24 film that they're gonna produce.
Oh, I did see that.
Yeah.
Not the movie. I saw that they're making it.
They're making it, and if they do pull it off, I already know if we do an episode on it, you're gonna be like, what the fuck did I watch? Like, what was this? That's a lot.
Ozu would be rolling over in his grave.
John, have you checked out Death Stranding 2? I know
yes,
this is a momentary
I'm playing
aside.
it.
Okay.
It's great.
Did you watch? They do the recap. They have an option where it's like you can recap the last one, and it's like it shows it's like slides, and it's like 17 slides, and I'm like, 17? They're not even gonna fucking scratch the surface of that last game.
It's kind of wild. But yeah, I'm interested to see how A24 does it. I also thought of Serial Experiments Lane, which we've covered on this podcast. And Dixon, you have not watched it yet.
True.
But I would love to do, now that I've done like a few film cuts of different anime, I'd love to do a film cut of that and watch it with you in like one go. That has a lot of interstitial sequences of like power lines with like the hum of electricity, and like this constantly, they let you really sink into what has just happened by just watching and listening to like the atmosphere of the digital age. And I feel like that pulls probably a lot from sort of what Ozu did. But yeah, I don't think that you've asked me if I would like to recommend it.
I wasn't planning on it.
Well, fine. I would recommend that. Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, it's great. No, it's a much more wholehearted commitment to. Yeah, I would say definitely watch Late Spring, watch Autumn Afternoon, watch Late Afternoon, the film that Ozu never made. I think Late Afternoon should be what the double feature is referred to as, because that's kind of a rad. If you ever would do it, have a Late Afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I think that from these two films I've seen of Ozu, I'm very interested to see what else he has. And I really enjoyed sort of this two sides of the coin storytelling for both of them. And I'm interested to see what is the summer one called?
Early Summer.
Early Summer. I was going to be like Midsummer.
Midsommar.
Watch Midsommar in the middle of late spring and early.
Quiet, melancholy family drama about burning your boyfriend alive.
It's actually more confusing than that because he has early spring. That if I go chronologically, he has late spring. Early summer.
Okay.
Early spring.
Okay.
Late autumn.
Okay.
End of summer, autumn afternoon.
Well, there you go, everybody. Watch late spring, early summer, early spring, late autumn.
If you have an opportunity to watch an Ozu film, you should take advantage.
Yeah,
of
just take it
a
slow
stab
like
at something.
Ozu, everybody.
I will say that's the Americans fucking it up though, because the actual titles of the films in Japanese
they're very
totally
different in Japanese.
They're all totally different.
An Autumn Afternoon in Japanese is The Taste of Mackerel.
That really makes me think that like the whoever the American people were like they all seem very fucking the same. Just call them whatever and move on.
I do love that the end of summer in Japanese is actually autumn of the family.
Well, yeah, I recommend it.
Okay.
Bottom line.
Good to hear.
There you go, everybody. Late spring, and also recommend autumn afternoon.
Autumn afternoon.
God damn it.
I would also recommend Late Spring. No surprise there. I really like Ozu, and all his movies that I have seen are really interesting. Tokyo Story is the one that everybody knows of. It's very good. I think Late Spring and An Autumn Afternoon are my favorites of his, but Tokyo Story is excellent. Definitely worth seeing. If you want to go a different route with Ozu, Good Morning is a really good movie about two flatulent little children who demand a television from their parents because their friends have one and they can watch pro wrestling over at their friend's house. And they want to be able to do it at home.
Wow.
And so they demand a TV from their parents. And when their parents say no, they decide to give them the silent treatment until they can get a television. So it's a much more kind of lighthearted Ozu film. There's lots of fart jokes in it.
Yep.
You think of Ozu as a serious filmmaker making movies about serious things. But this movie's about two farty kids who really want a TV. And like that's also a big cultural moment in Japan, right? Where it's like, okay, you're getting this Western influence where like television is becoming a thing and wrestling is, becoming a thing and like all this stuff where, it's a big moment of change in Japan and Ozu is talking about it. Most of his movies are through the dynamics between adult children and their parents. And this is through child children and their parents. So it's interesting as well. And it's not as, I feel like, when I recommend a movie like this, the person looks at me like I'm giving them homework to do. And it's like, that's not what I'm saying. Like, I think Ozu actually is a very funny filmmaker. And, like in An Autumn Afternoon, there's a ton of hilarious scenes in that movie. Late Spring, there are some funny moments in it, but Good Morning is more of a comedy than, his other films. But I do think Ozu always has some good comedic bits in his movies that make them a little bit more lighthearted. And like, I'm not telling you to go to film class to watch his movies. I do think they resonate. Like if you will come halfway and come to the movie open and try to like be receptive to what it's giving, I think you'll get a lot out of it. So,
yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that wraps things up for Afterthoughts. I have been your host, Michael Dixon. With me as always,
Ryan King. We're gonna just like play sounds of waves as the
that'd be nice.
Oh, that's a good
Some
idea.
ASMR podcasting.
And
John Garcia, take a step outside, everybody. Breathe the air. Really slow down. Appreciate what you have. Maybe look at a sign that says Coca-Cola this way, and think what it really means.
It means capitalism is intruding on your life.
That's right. Michael Dixon.
Yeah, I introduced myself, but I will say the closing line. Thanks for putting up with our bullshit.
reflect upon the bullshit that we have given you. Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.